Anita, and welcome to the show. It's great to have another South African.
Hi, Murray. Wonderful to be here.
Great. So Anita Hamilton-Williams is a functional medicine health coach. She's also trained at the School of Applied Functional Medicine like I have, and is located in Durban, South Africa. And you specialize in gut health and hormones for your clients. And I think that's got a lot to do with your own story. Is that correct, Anita?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So take us back to the first early signs and symptoms that you were experiencing of dis-ease in the body.
Okay, so when I look back at my health challenges, they center around asthma and estrogen dominance, which is linked to the infertility that I experienced with both of my children. And in my early 20s, when most women are at their most fertile, I battled for about 18 months to fall pregnant with my first child. And in my early 30s, I decided to take up running, joined a running club, and found that I was very tight of breath when I started exercising. And I thought at the time that I was just unfit and that I would eventually overcome this feeling of being unfit and feeling of being able to breathe. But even a couple of months later, I noticed that my chest was still really tight when I ran. And the lady who ran the club suggested that I go and speak to the doctor. So I went off to the doctor, and the doctor diagnosed me with exercise-induced asthma. And at the time, it felt like I was allergic to exercise and that I shouldn't actually be doing any form of exercise.
Right.
But I did want to run. And what he prescribed was an asthma pump. Okay. So I would take a pump of the asthma pump just before I ran. My chest would open up and I would be absolutely fine. And I just thought that I have a weak chest. And this asthma condition that I was diagnosed with, in the next couple of years during my 30s, I seemed to pick up every cold that went around. And in fact, when I picked up a cold, it would invariably turn into bronchitis, or it would turn into pneumonia, and in one case it was a pleurisy that I had. And it was absolutely dreadful, because in my mind I thought, when I die one day, it's going to be related to not being able to breathe, because everything centered around this asthma and the fact that I couldn't breathe. It's a frightening experience to go through. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I suffered from asthma as well, so it's I know exactly what it feels like not to be able to breathe. And I think there's so many people out there that have been diagnosed with asthma and are living their lives just like that, taking their asthma pumps or their steroid pumps. So what do you say to people like that?
Well, I think that when I discovered that I no longer had asthma, and I looked back at, well, what has actually changed? It was really due to a diet that I went on. And it was a case of, I think, like many women, you pick up a couple of kilograms and then you want to lose the weight and you see what diet is around at the time. You try the diet. And the particular diet that I tried was one called the Banting diet, which I know many South Africans will be very familiar with. It's similar.
What it is, yeah.
Yeah, it's similar to a paleo type diet, except that in a Banting diet, you are allowed dairy. Paleo, obviously, you can't have dairy. And in the Banting diet, the only fruit that you're allowed is berries. Mm-hmm. And in the paleo diet, you're allowed a wider variety of fruit. But in principle, around the grains and the wheat and the refined and processed products, it's very similar. And so I started on the Banting diet. And within a couple of weeks, I'd lost about 9 kilograms. And I was quite astounded. I don't think I even needed to lose 9 kilograms at the time. Mm-hmm. But what happened shortly after that is my husband and I and a group of friends went on a hike. And we climbed up a waterfall that we had done about a year prior to that. And I realized that when I'd climbed up to the top, that I hadn't actually brought my asthma pump with me and I didn't need it. And it was something really subtle that started to improve gradually over time. It probably took about 3 months. Mm-hmm. But it was then that I thought, you know what, I haven't used it. It's next to my bed, it's in my car, it's in my cubbyhole, it's in my bag, these these asthma pumps, and I'm just not reaching for it anymore.
So it was kind of
And
like
so that's
coincidence.
when I realized that's
Mm-hmm.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. And that's when I realized that, well, what have I changed in my diet, and what is the link between my diet and the food, and my symptoms rather. And so what I then went on to do was, this was probably in my late 40s, mid 40s. What I then went on to do was, a couple of friends had said to me, you're looking great, you've lost all this weight, obviously the inflammation had gone down, won't you help us and do the same for us? And so I started running small groups and teaching other women how to, start improving their health. Obviously, their weight would start to increase. And then I noticed that there were a group of women that, regardless of the diet that they were on, they still suffered with a lot of challenges.
Okay.
And this really bothered me. It was like, what is it that I don't know? And what do I need to go and find out so that I can help these women? I also, at the same time, had a young son. I had my second child at the age of 40, also due to estrogen dominance and infertility. So I have a 16-year gap between my two children. And wanting to be healthy for my son, I realized that I had to go and find out more information. And this is what led me to studying at the School of Applied Functional Medicine. And when I discovered the concept of functional medicine, it just resonated so much with me. It really, really did. The fact that we are an integrated whole, we can't separate different parts of the body, and we need to treat the body as a whole.
Right. So knowing what you know now and everything that you've learned together, how would you say you connect what you were experiencing in terms of fertility, those challenges, as well as what you were experiencing in terms of asthma? Because most people do not connect the two.
Yes, yes. So I think what was really helpful for me is creating a timeline with and noting down every symptom or every diagnosis that I had on a timeline, and also including things like, when my children were born, when I got married, any major event, moving, any kind of event that may have been stressful. And once everything was down on paper in a timeline, I could then start to see, oh, I was on a course of antibiotics here, and from those antibiotics, then this happened, and then this happened. And everything started to become a lot clearer. It was a little bit like building a jigsaw puzzle and finally finding all the edges of the jigsaw puzzle. It was like there was still a lot of unanswered questions that I had, but finally things started to come together for me.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. I'm glad that you mentioned the timeline, because that is one of the most important aspects of how we approach a client and in functional medicine, is taking them through their history from birth, even pre-birth, right up to today, because everything has an impact on what you're experiencing today.
Absolutely. There's that timeline, and I can't tell you the number of times that I've sat with a client, and as we start mapping out the timeline, you can see the aha moments coming,
Yeah.
and them drawing their own conclusions about this happened, and oh, and that was the result. It's a really powerful tool that we use there.
Yeah. So you found the School of Applied Functional Medicine. Did you use any more principles, or had you by that time already reversed most of the symptoms that you'd been experiencing?
I don't think that I had reversed all of them, and I don't even today, I don't view myself as being I don't view it as being a journey where I started at one point and there's an end point, because we move into different stages and phases of our life. As women, we've obviously at some point go through perimenopause and menopause, and then different health issues crop up. So for me, in my stage now, it's around osteoporosis and bone health, and making sure my estrogen levels are good, and energy and vitality is there, and also looking at blood sugar and making sure that that's under control. So I think each stage brings new awareness and new discoveries and new challenges.
Just for the people that don't really understand estrogen dominance like we do, could you give them a couple of signs and symptoms of estrogen dominance and that they might be experiencing to alert them that they have estrogen dominance?
Yeah. Well, first of all, estrogen dominance is, I don't want to paint it as a villain and the fact that we must be concerned about estrogen, because it's a necessary hormone that we as women must have. But the issue is really around the balance of estrogen to progesterone. So two things that are really vital for a woman is that as she moves into her perimenopause years, her progesterone levels will start to decrease. And the ratio between estrogen may not be excessively high, but the balance between estrogen and progesterone is really important. And so if her levels of progesterone have dropped significantly, then by default she will be estrogen dominant. And the symptoms can be anything from brain fog. They can be picking up excess weight. It can be infertility. It can be heavy menstrual periods with clotting. It can be mood swings. It can be bloating, severe PMS. Yeah, I could actually go on and on and on. But I think one of the other key areas, so I said two were quite vital. The one is the fact that progesterone levels drop, but the second is that although we make estrogen in our body, we are also exposed to xenoestrogens. So xenoestrogens meaning estrogens from outside our body. And what happens is that on each little cell in our body, we have what I like to refer to as antenna or receptors, which can pick up estrogen, and it can dock into that little receptor and then influence what is happening inside the cell. And so when we take in products, things like pesticides, herbicides, skin products, cleaning products, a lot of them have chemicals in it that mimic estrogen. And so these molecules dock in a little antenna on the cell, and then the body recognizes that as if it was estrogen, and so it performs some kind of estrogenic function. And so the combination of these xenoestrogens in combination with a drop in progesterone can create a lot of problems for women during those perimenopausal years. And then something I didn't mention around estrogen dominance is the link to breast cancer. 80% of
men, right?
Yeah, yeah, 80% of breast cancers are hormonally linked. And it's not just the fact that we are taking in all of these xenoestrogens, but the fact that we also have to be able to have good elimination pathways, because if we are not able to eliminate the estrogen that is built up on a monthly cycle in our body, that estrogen just gets recirculated. So it's a combination of taking in excess estrogens and potentially not being able to eliminate those excess estrogens. So that is a huge piece of the puzzle that I was learning when I discovered what my challenges around estrogen dominance were.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think that whole idea, it's underestimated how many xenoestrogens or pseudo hormones we come into contact with on a daily basis. And we're seeing it even in our daughters. I mean, my girls are 10 and 12, and they're the last in their class to be maturing. And it's just, I think there's just a flood of too many beauty products filled with hormones, and we can see that the young girls are maturing at a much younger age than.
Absolutely. And that is one of the challenges around around having high levels of estrogen. If your children have a period early, if you have your first pregnancy fairly late, then you are exposed to estrogen for a much longer period of time. And that in itself causes a risk. So we need to do whatever we can in order to reduce the amount of estrogen that we are exposed to. Obviously, if your children have a period and they start at an early age, I read the other day of a young girl starting at the age of 7.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And, aside from the emotional impact of a young girl of 7 managing with a period, there's also the risk of now being exposed to estrogen for at least 5 years more than the average person, if you go back, a couple of, 50 or 100 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why, I mean, you and I are both, we both do these cleanses or detoxes, and I'm currently running one now. And the focus is, I mean, not just the toxins that we think of, like environmental toxins, the air we breathe and the chemicals we take in, but really these pseudo hormones that are coming into our environment as well. Yeah.
Correct.
To get those out.
Correct.
Great. So can you give one tip or thing that you would like to tell somebody that might be suffering and thinking whether functional medicine is right for them? Because I think there's so many people standing there and thinking, okay, she managed to reverse her asthma or heal her fertility, or find her way out of that, but it's not going to work for her.
I think that what is really key, what was helpful for me, is understanding the power of food as a medicine. And I think that we can tend to expect or want a very quick response. So we have a symptom, and we're used to taking some kind of tablet or medication, and we want a really quick response. And food is a much more gradual response. So I would recommend anybody who wants to look at a functional medicine approach is to give themselves a period of 3 months to work with someone to look at cutting certain things out of their diet. And even if you don't want to cut things out of your diet, then look at adding things in. We all know, I think, regardless of what diet, what modality you look at, the importance of vegetables is key. And so if you just start increasing, 5 to 8 servings of vegetables a day, if you just start increasing and do that for 3 months and see what the impact is. So that's probably where I would start. And then the second thing I would say is that it's never too late to make a change. The body has got an incredible amount of resilience, and the body knows how to heal itself given the right circumstances. So we don't have to think that we have to do everything perfectly, but if we just start taking the steps in the right direction, the body knows what to do and it will heal itself.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much. If anybody wants to reach out to you, how can they get in touch with you?
The best place is on Facebook or Instagram. On Facebook, my site is called, my Facebook business page is Anita Hamilton-Williams Living Well. Sorry, it's such a long one, especially since my surname is so long. And then on Instagram, it's Anita Hamilton-Williams. So you can follow me on either of those.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time, Anita. I wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. I've loved it. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheers.